rallying against the GOP health care plan.
This bill is riddled from top to bottom with problems.
Conservative lawmakers fight over the proposed Obamacare replacement. Mounting campaign. Democrats aim to stall the president's Supreme Court nominee. Deadly attack. Suicide bombers killed dozens as Syrians mark the 6th anniversary of the country's civil war. An emotional encounter. Wails of joy as the Pope greets a small group of pilgrims in St. Peter's Square. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, March 15th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Tea Party conservatives withstand freezing temperatures outside the U.S. Capitol to rally against the Obamacare replacement plan. The group Freedom Works organized the protest.
Keep your promise! Keep your promise!
The conservative activists call on Congress to keep their promise to get rid of Obamacare. Republican Rand Paul says the current GOP plan doesn't go far enough. He encouraged the crowd to keep applying pressure on Republicans.
There's too much government interference in it. We're still talking tax subsidies. We're talking about a 30% penalty if you decide not to take insurance. I mean, this is government fingerprints all over it. This is just not as bad as Obamacare.
Republican leaders are fighting defections from the right just 1 week before the House is expected to vote to replace Obamacare and defund Planned Parenthood. The Trump administration is pulling out all the stops to convince Republicans to back the GOP health care bill. Vice President Mike Pence is on Capitol Hill courting people in his own party in order to bolster support for the Obamacare replacement. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports. Jason.
Lauren, the vice president met with the largest group of conservatives in the House, called the Republican Study Committee, and House Republicans are huddling this hour. Earlier today, I spoke with Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, who's been very critical of his own party's plan. He was part of the group rallying against it outside the Capitol today.
Look, we want to do what we told the voters we're going to do. This legislation doesn't accomplish that. That's the problem. Doesn't fully repeal Obamacare. Doesn't bring down the cost of premiums, and certainly, as you can tell, is not uniting our party. That's the problem with the legislation. So we want to change it. We want to make sure it does what we told the American people we were going to do, which is a full repeal, and then let's replace it with those policies that will actually bring down the cost of premiums.
So what other changes do you want to see besides lowering the cost of premiums?
The key change is the regulations that drove up the costs. So that's the key change. The Speaker's bill also doesn't fully repeal Obamacare, because we didn't tell the American people we're going to repeal Obamacare but keep some of the taxes. We didn't tell the American people we're going to repeal Obamacare but take the Medicaid expansion and extend it for several years. And we certainly didn't tell the American people we were going to repeal Obamacare but we're going to provide some subsidies for the insurance industry. We didn't say that. So let's do what we said. And if we can't unite on anything, then let's go back to what did unite us about 15 months ago. The very same bill, the clean repeal bill that we introduced, that Senator Paul introduced on the Senate side, that we all voted for just 15 months ago, put on then President Obama's desk. Of course, he didn't sign it, he vetoed it, but we know if that gets to President Trump's desk, we'll get a different outcome. So that to me is the simplest, surest way. Vote on what we did before and what we told the people we were going to do.
Is Speaker Ryan amenable to these changes?
We'll see. I would hope so. The White House seems very open. We've talked with all kinds of folks at the White House. They seem open to it, but the Speaker seemed to take this, he's the one who said it's a binary choice. It's either this or nothing. That's not how the legislative process works. I mean, remember, this bill was rolled out 6 days ago, went to committee, no amendments were offered, went straight to markup, no hearings, passed it, now we're just supposed to take it or leave it. That's not how the process works. It's not how American democracy is supposed to work. That's not fair to the 750,000 people I get the privilege of serving and representing. So let's hope that changes and we can amend this in a major way and make it consistent with what the people sent us here to do.
Pro-lifers have been worried that the tax credits will end up funding abortion coverage.
I'm for keeping that language in there, making sure that...
Right now the House bill has this pro-life language in there that protects it from going into abortions.
We need to fight that and make sure it's not stripped out because of the reconciliation rules and the Byrd rules and everything they have in the Senate. We also need to make sure the Planned Parenthood defund language stays in the legislation as well. You think about what Planned Parenthood was caught doing, and just how reprehensible that was on tape. It's important that language stays in as well. So we're confident that that can survive.
Speaker Paul Ryan telling Fox Business that he's open to, quote, improvements and refinements to the Republican plan, but he adds there are limits. Vice President Pence says that some changes encouraged by House conservatives have been agreed upon today. Lauren, the House Budget Committee is set to debate the GOP Obama replacement tomorrow.
It's all about making a deal. Jason, what do you expect will happen?
Well, it's hard to predict, really. The committee has a number of conservative mavericks on it, so the vote tomorrow could be quite close.
All right, we'll check in with you again tomorrow. Thank you. Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. On a trip to Michigan with auto workers, President Trump promises to eliminate strict Obama-era regulations on cars and trucks. He believes the move will lead to more jobs and higher wages. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee is at the White House. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The president challenges what's called corporate average fuel economy, or CAFE. These are carbon emission targets designed to improve fuel efficiency. The White House says the Obama administration upped those standards so high, it's stifling the auto industry.
We're going to bring a lot of jobs back.
President Trump arriving in Michigan to meet with some of the biggest names in the car business, including General Motors, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler.
We have to fight side by side to protect our industry and to stop the jobs from leaving our country.
He tells auto executives and workers he wants more jobs and higher wages, and announced that GM is creating or retaining 900 jobs in Michigan.
And that's just the beginning, folks. In fact, I told them that's peanuts. That's peanuts.
But he says this wouldn't happen if the Obama-era fuel standards remain in place. The Environmental Protection Agency set a rule which requires cars and trucks to get 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025, a standard regulators say the industry may not meet.
We're not even in the realm of good, let alone perfect.
Celine Firth at the Heritage Foundation contends the previous administration's regulations are bad for consumers. He estimates they add $3,800 to the cost of a car. Firth agrees with the president's rollback, but says at this point it won't be enough.
I believe that Trump's people understand the cost that this is levying, so I'm not saying that Trump is doing the wrong thing. He's doing the right thing, but he's doing, the first step in a mile journey.
The White House also fires back against critics who claim President Trump doesn't care about the environment. EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt says they are pro-growth and pro-environment.
We need to work diligently to grow jobs at the local level, but be good stewards of our air and water at the same time.
Trump spoke in his address to Congress about creating a deregulation task force inside of every government agency. The president's rollback announced today affects fuel standards for the next 10 years, meaning no immediate impact, but it could lead to legal battles with environmental groups in states like California, who have already adopted high tailpipe standards. Lauren?
Wyatt, we're also learning that the White House will cut funding to some agencies, including the EPA. What are your sources saying?
Nothing is final yet, Lauren, but some reports, as well as our sources, are indicating that the EPA's budget will indeed be reduced. The White House could also cut some state grants aimed at funding protection for air and water. They could also offset that, of course, by reducing taxes in other areas. Lauren?
Wyatt Goolsbee at the White House. Thank you, Wyatt. President Trump's revised travel order faced 3 lawsuits in court today. Refugee aid groups in Maryland, families in Seattle, and the state of Hawaii have all filed challenges on the order. Attorneys in Maryland told a federal judge the measure still discriminates against Muslims. We're waiting the decisions of the judges. The order is expected to go into effect tomorrow. President Donald Trump earned more than $150 million and paid $36.5 million in income taxes in 2005. The president is now criticizing the reporter who released 2 pages of those tax returns last night on MSNBC's Rachel Maddow show. The president tweeted, "Does anybody really believe that a reporter who nobody ever heard of went to his mailbox and found my tax returns at NBC News? Fake news!" exclamation point. In a statement, the White House says the pages were published illegally. The bipartisan leaders of the House Intelligence Committee have not found proof that Trump Tower was wiretapped ahead of the 2016 election. President Trump tweeted earlier this month, "Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory."
We don't have any evidence that that took place, and in fact, I don't believe, just in the last week of time, the people we've talked to, I don't think there was an actual tap of Trump Tower.
FBI Director James Comey will testify at a House Intelligence Committee hearing later this month as lawmakers look for evidence. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said on Monday, when the president tweeted about the wiretaps, that what he really meant was general surveillance. The Department of Justice indicts 4 people, including 2 Russian officers, of a massive computer hack against Yahoo. Investigators say they used the stolen information to access the accounts of U.S. and Russian government officials and Russian journalists.
The FSB unit that the defendants worked for, the Center for Information Security, also known as Center 18, is also the FBI's point of contact in Moscow for cybercrime matters.
This is the first criminal case brought against Russian government officials by the U.S. Department of Justice. And it says the hack was initiated in January 2014 and affected at least 500 million Yahoo user accounts. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. We begin in Syria, where suicide bombers hit the main judicial building and a restaurant. At least 30 people died. The attacks in Damascus are the latest in a series of deadly explosions targeting government-controlled areas. No one has claimed responsibility, but they mirror recent assaults by an al-Qaeda affiliate. Syria is marking the 6th anniversary of the country's civil war. More than 400,000 people have been killed and millions of others displaced. The Philippine vice president raises alarm over the president's deadly crackdown on illegal drugs. In a video message, Leni Robredo asked Filipinos to defy brazen incursions on their rights.
We agree that our people deserve nothing less than a safe environment, so that anyone can walk the streets safely, whether in daylight or at nighttime. But drug abuse should not be treated as one that can be solved with bullets alone.
In the video, Robredo makes some of her sharpest critiques so far of President Rodrigo Duterte. Philippine presidents and vice presidents are elected separately and often come from rival political parties. Pope Francis declares that employers who fire workers for unclear economic reasons are committing a grave sin.
Questa persona fa un peccato gravissimo.
The Holy Father made the comments at his weekly meeting with pilgrims in St. Peter's Square and made a wider appeal to businesses to ensure dignified work for all of their employees. Alan Holdren is the Rome bureau chief for EWTN's Catholic News Agency. Alan, these remarks that we just heard were not part of the Pope's prepared text for today's audience. What do you think prompted this?
Well, Lauren, he was responding to a group from Sky Italia, a TV broadcaster that exists throughout the world, Sky News. A lot of workers from the Rome office are going to be either fired or moved to Milan in a move that Sky has planned. They are disputing this. They brought their position to the Pope, and the Pope called out to them and said, listen, Sky, this is very important that if you're going to be doing this, that you keep your workers' rights, and especially the rights of their families, very close to your hearts.
He often champions workers' rights. What else did he say? Did he expand on it?
Yes, he did. He often speaks about workers' rights, in particular lamenting the youth unemployment, both here in Italy and in the rest of the world. He said that work gives us dignity, and managers have the obligation to provide for the dignity of their workers, making sure that they're able to walk with their heads high. We've seen this in so many places. On the trips that I've been on with Pope Francis, he has often met with people from what he calls the world of work, asking for them to ensure the dignity of their workers, making sure that people around the world can look others directly in the eyes, as he said today.
We also heard basically the same message from President Donald Trump earlier. This Pope had a remarkable, very brief encounter today with pilgrims from China before the audience began. Tell us about that.
It really was remarkable, Lauren, as you said. The Pope, as he made his way around the square in the Pope-mobile before the audience, at the very end, he got off the Pope-mobile before going up to take his seat and give his address. And right there at the base of the dive that leads up to St. Peter's was a group of about 6 pilgrims, and they had a statue of Our Lady of Fatima with them. They were Catholics from the area of Tianjin, China, we found out later, and they were wailing, they were weeping. The women in particular holding up their children for the Pope to kiss them. It It's really a very touching, very moving encounter between the Pope and these Catholics. It's estimated that there are 12 million Catholics in China, but we don't often hear very much about them.
And they're often not able to speak about their faith. So thank you so much, Alan Holdren, Rome Bureau Chief for Catholic News Agency.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, the Democrats plan to stop President Trump's Supreme Court nominee.
He harbors a right-wing, pro-corporate, special interest agenda.
Banning Islam, a key vote in the Netherlands. A Catholic newspaper editor tells us what's at stake in today's election. Democrats step up their attacks on President Trump's Supreme Court nominee. They want to keep Neil Gorsuch from joining the court.
Judge Gorsuch may act like a neutral, calm judge, but his record and his career clearly show he harbors a right-wing, pro-corporate, special interest agenda.
Gorsuch would replace the late Antonin Scalia, another pro-life conservative. The Senate Judiciary Committee will begin hearings on Gorsuch next week. Earlier this week, the Netherlands refused to allow the Turkish foreign minister to land, setting off a diplomatic clash. Protests erupted in both countries, and the Dutch embassy in Turkey was temporarily closed. The Turkish president, Recep Erdogan, called the Dutch government Nazi remnants and fascist. Now today, voters in the Netherlands are choosing a new prime minister and parliament after this campaign filled with far-right populist rhetoric. One leading candidate called for banning the Quran, closing mosques and the Muslim school, and restricting immigration from Muslim countries. Joining us now is Anton de Wit, editor-in-chief of Katholiek Nieuwsblad, a Dutch Catholic weekly newspaper. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
What are Catholic leaders saying about the populist calls for banning Islam?
Catholic leaders are very critical of the populist ban on Islam. We have one bishop, particularly in the Netherlands, the Bishop of Den Bosch, the city of Den Bosch, Gerard de Korte, who has said a Catholic can vote pretty much everything, but not the PVV, not the Freedom Party of Wilders, because of its anti-Islamic stance and its attack on religious freedom.
Why is the growth of Islam such a big concern in the Netherlands?
Yes, it is. Because, refugees are a big concern. Islam is a big concern. All the concerns that are, internationally shared, of course. It's not something typical Dutch, I guess. But we do have quite a large population of Muslim people living in the Netherlands, traditionally from the 1970s on. So they are pretty well integrated in Dutch society. That is not a problem. There have not been, so far, there have not been any terrorist attacks, but still people are very concerned because of terrorist attacks in other places in Europe, in Brussels, in Paris, and so on. So the fear of Islam is very real at the moment.
The populist movement in the Netherlands follows Britain's vote last year to leave the EU, Donald Trump's election here in the United States, France and Germany are holding elections. Are we going to see a more nationalistic Europe, in your opinion?
Yes, I do think so. So the European Union is very unpopular at the moment. I think there is mainly across Europe an authority problem for all political institutions. So people tend to mistrust political institutions, be it our own national government, but even more the higher governments in Brussels, the European Union. It's very unpopular at the moment.
Anton de Wit, editor-in-chief of Katholiek Nieuwsblad, a Dutch Catholic weekly newspaper. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
Up next, spring break at the Vatican. Harvard seniors get an eye-opening education. The Easter Bunny is coming to town. How you can see him at the White House. United Nations estimates that a refugee stays in a camp for an average of 17 years. One international advocacy group is working to change that. In Defense of Christians is helping Christian refugees build safe and self-sustaining economic communities. Joining me now is the managing director of that program, Stephen Hollingshead. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
What is your goal for refugees? Security and economic stability are key.
Yes. Well, as you mentioned, the UN knows that people stay in camps an average of 17 years, and that's because not just governments, but also even churches focus on relief, the short-term need, the tents, the blankets,
right,
and so forth. And they don't focus on economic revitalization.
And what is that specifically?
Well, first you need security. We need a safe zone like the ones that worked in Bosnia and in Kurdistan.
Excuse me, but after they get out of the refugee camps,
right,
then once they leave there, they go back home, they need a safe zone, is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, they need the safe zone to have the security so they feel like they can go back. But then their economy has completely stopped. So how do you get it started again? And the goal of our project, IraqHaven.org, is to get American and Mexican and European business people to create distribution channels to buy their stuff so that they can restart those farms, restart those processing plants.
You went to Iraq and have some experience with this around olives.
Yes. Well, we didn't get it put together this year. We were racing the frost. The last 3 years since ISIS destroyed the only olive mill on the Nineveh Plain, olive farmers haven't even picked their olives because if you don't make them right into olive oil, they're ruined, and it's not worth the labor to pick them. So I was trying to put together, we got some olive farmers together. They were ready. I got an Australian olive oil expert, and the Italians were going to give us a mill, and we were going to make this stuff, but we couldn't get it sold in time.
Happen, right, because of the frost. But that's the idea. That is sort of the nut of what you want to do, which is have these people who have been displaced, again, take ownership of their community. And the other way that
if you ask them, that's what they want. They don't want more handouts. They want to work to earn their daily bread. They want to have that dignity that grown-ups...
Dignity of the human person. It's very much like the Catholic social teaching of subsidiarity.
Yes.
So what do you think needs to be done to get that security so that the people feel like, yes, they can go back?
Well, first you start with an international safe zone like the ones that worked right next door in Kurdistan in 1991, that worked in Bosnia, so that the security's there. But then you have to get that economic redevelopment going. That's why what we're doing is trying, instead of the usual government way is, oh, bridges were bombed, let's build the bridges, let's start top down, let's build a hospital. We're starting bottom up to try to find out what are the assets, what do they have? The first thing you should ask, what do you do? There's no government organization going family by family and saying, what were you before? Were you a teacher? Were you an engineer?
And trying, instead of to fit the location, the bombed out location with the person, fit the person with it. It makes absolute sense. What is the website?
IraqHaven.org.
IraqHaven.org. Managing Director of the program, Stephen Hollingshead. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Pope Francis warns against doing acts of charity just to get praise or credit.
L'ipocrisia può insinuarsi ovunque.
In his weekly meeting with pilgrims in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis said the way we show love to others is hypocritical if it's tainted by self-interest. The Pope urged us to pray to be witnesses of Christ's love, especially to those in need. A member of Harvard's graduating class used their spring break to participate in the first ever Harvard-Vatican Leadership Summit.
The idea of examining our how morality guides our leadership styles was really the main impetus. Plus, the access that we were getting as a group of Harvard students to talk to cardinals who have really been transformative within the Holy See, it seemed too good to pass up.
That's Kieran Schmidt, a student at the Harvard Business School. He says the experience has been influential on the group as future leaders. The head of the Vatican Secretariat for the Economy, Cardinal George Pell, was asked to address the group of 20 students. He encouraged them to have a set of principles worth fighting for. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Don't let the snow on the ground fool you. Spring is less than a week away. The White House is preparing for its annual Easter egg roll. You can enter a lottery at recreation.gov for your chance to win free tickets to the event. Registration ends Saturday, and the winners will be notified March 31st. Good luck. I'll see you again tomorrow night. Good night and God bless.